The barren landscape of Artemis 9 stretched out before Sergeant Lure, like a pale canvas of desolation. The moon's surface was a wasteland of craters and jagged rock formations, broken only by the acidic forest that loomed at the perimeter of the Kravari Alliance's forward operating base. Overhead, the gas giant that Artemis 9 orbited cast an eerie, perpetual twilight across the terrain. It had been half a cycle since the Dawn Treaty, and the Kravari military presence here was meant to be nothing more than a formality, a show of strength at the edge of contested space. Captain Serac stood at the command center viewport, his forearms folded in a gesture of contemplation that Lure had come to recognize as pride. The captain's exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lighting, adorned with the ceremonial markings of the Light Battalion, the most elite division of the Kravari militia. "Sergeant!" Serac's voice resonated through his speech amplifier, a device designed to project authority as much as sound. "What do you make of the human artifacts your reconnaissance team recovered?" Lure approached the examination table, where the objects in question had been laid out with meticulous precision. Human weapons were primitive by Kravari standards, projectile-based, reliant on chemical propellants, rather than the elegant particle displacement technology that had made the Kravari military feared across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. "Inefficient," Lure responded, the derision in his voice unmistakable. "Their most advanced rifle requires physical ammunition. Captain, the energy output to damage ratio is laughable." Captain Serac's upper arms gestured in agreement, while his lower pair activated the holographic display. Yet, they managed to hold the Centauri expanse against the Novan fleet for 2 full rotations before the treaty was signed. His tone carried a note of puzzlement that Lure found unsettling. The Novans had quantum artillery. The humans had these toys. Lieutenant Kira joined them, her sensory appendages twitching with interest as she analyzed the human equipment. As the battalion's technology specialist, she had spent more time studying enemy weaponry than anyone else on Artemis 9. "It's not about their weapons," she said, her voice modulated to the precise frequency that indicated scientific certainty in Kravari communication. "It's what they do with them, and what they do without them." Before Lure could inquire further, a junior technician hurried into the command center, the irregular pattern of his movement indicators flashing with urgency. "Sergeant, we've found something else among the human remnants," the technician, Private Vess, said as he placed a small device on the table. "It appears to be some sort of recording mechanism." Lure picked up the device, studying its crude interface. Unlike Kravari technology, which operated on thought commands and neural links, this required physical interaction. He pressed what appeared to be an activation node. The sound that emerged filled the command center, a rhythmic, pulsing beat, accompanied by a soft whooshing noise. It took Lure a moment to identify it, the sound of a human cardiovascular system. A heartbeat, followed by the sound of breathing. But there was something else beneath those biological functions, a faint, almost subliminal pattern that made Lure's own pulse quicken involuntarily. "Turn it off," Captain Serac ordered, his discomfort evident in the sudden rigidity of his posture. Lure complied, but not before noticing how the background noise had begun to morph into something that sounded disturbingly like the screams of a soldier under psychological torture. "What was that?" Lieutenant Kira asked, her scientific detachment momentarily shaken. "Unknown," Lure replied, securing the device in a containment field. "But I intend to find out." That night, as the artificial lighting of the base dimmed to simulate nocturnal conditions, Lure remained in the analysis chamber, studying the human recording. He had isolated the various components of the audio, the heartbeat, the breathing, and the underlying pattern that had caused such discomfort. When separated, each element seemed harmless enough, but when combined, a security alert interrupted his analysis, its shrill tone piercing the quiet of the laboratory. The command network had detected an intrusion. Something had bypassed the outermost perimeter sensors without triggering them. Lure rushed to the security station, expecting to find the base on high alert, but instead encountered an eerie calm. The warning systems had gone silent, as if they had never sounded at all. "System malfunction?" he inquired of the night duty officer. "Negative, Sergeant." The alert registered, then disappeared. No trace in the logs, no error codes, as if it never happened. Lure felt a cold sensation across his neural pathways, a Kravari instinctive response equivalent to what humans would call a shiver. "A diversion," he muttered. "Check all patrol units, now." The communications officer complied, sending out status requests to the 4 patrols currently deployed around the base perimeter. 3 responded immediately with all clear signals. The 4th remained silent. "Last known position of Patrol 4?" Lure demanded. "Eastern quadrant, near the edge of the acid forest," came the reply. "They reported routine observations 18 minutes ago." Captain Sarax was awakened and joined them in the command center. His normally imposing figure somehow diminished by the late cycle lighting and the growing sense of unease. "Dispatch a search team," he ordered. "Full combat configuration." Lure led the search team himself, accompanied by Lieutenant Kira and 6 combat specialists. They moved through the darkness with precision, their enhanced vision allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain with ease. The acid forest loomed ahead, its vegetation a twisted parody of organic life, adapted to the caustic environment of Artemis 9. They found Patrol 4 exactly 3.7 kilometers from the base perimeter. All 4 soldiers were dead, their bodies arranged in a neat, almost ceremonial formation, stacked like specimens in a laboratory. There were no signs of weapons fire, no evidence of a struggle. "Cause of death?" Captain Sarax's voice came through the communication link. Lieutenant Kira knelt beside the bodies, her diagnostic equipment scanning for answers. "No external trauma," she reported. "No acid burns, no projectile wounds, no energy weapon signatures." She paused, her sensory appendages quivering. "According to my readings, they simply stopped functioning. Simultaneous neural shutdown." "Impossible," Sarax responded. "Check again." Kira's second scan yielded the same results. "Whatever killed them left no trace, Captain. It's as if their bodies just decided to die." As they prepared to transport the bodies back to base, Lure noticed something, a faint shimmer in the air near the edge of the forest, like heat distortion but more patterned, almost geometric. He moved toward it, weapon raised. "Sergeant," one of the combat specialists questioned. "There's something," Lure began, but the shimmer vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He shook his head. "Nothing. A sensor ghost." Back at the base, the atmosphere had changed. The death of Patrol 4 had spread through the ranks, and with it, a growing sense of unease. The Kravari were warriors, bred for battle across 1,000 worlds. But they were accustomed to enemies they could see, threats they could quantify and counter with superior technology. This was different. This was shadow warfare. A second patrol disappeared the following day, and a third the day after that. Each time, the pattern was the same: communication lost, bodies found arranged with methodical precision, no evident cause of death. The base's perimeter was tightened, sensor arrays recalibrated to maximum sensitivity, combat drones deployed in overlapping patterns that should have detected even the most advanced stealth technology. It made no difference. On the 4th day, a new element entered the equation. A thick, unnatural fog began to gather around the base, originating from the acid forest. Environmental analysis confirmed it was not a natural phenomenon. The chemical composition was engineered, designed to diffuse light and disrupt sensor functionality. "They're using the environment against us," Lure reported to Captain Sarax. "The fog contains particles that absorb our scanner wavelengths." Serax had aged visibly in the past few days, his commanding presence diminished by the mounting losses and the inability to identify their enemy. We've seen no evidence of human presence on Artemis 9. The treaty is a piece of data. Captain, Lore interrupted. A breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. The evidence is all around us. 4 patrols eliminated without a trace. Security systems compromised. And now this. He gestured toward the viewport, where the engineered fog had reduced visibility to less than 50 meters. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Then, through that silence, came a sound that froze every Krivari present. A whisper, emanating from the communication system, mimicking Captain Serax's voice with perfect fidelity. "Retreat! Retreat! They are inside! Retreat!" Panic erupted as soldiers reached for weapons, neural links blazing with confused commands and countercommands. Captain Serax roared for order, his actual voice cutting through the chaos. "That is not me," he bellowed. "Security override Alpha 7. Lock down all communications." The whispers ceased as the system was purged. But the damage was done. The seed of fear had been planted, and Lore could see it taking root in the eyes of even the most seasoned warriors. That night, Lore continued his investigation of the human recording device, driven by the growing conviction that it held the key to understanding their invisible enemy. He had isolated a pattern within the audio, a frequency that seemed to resonate with specific neural pathways in the Krivari brain, triggering responses that bypassed conscious thought. His analysis was interrupted by Lieutenant Kira, who entered the laboratory with uncharacteristic haste. "We found something," she said without preamble. "A human biological analysis device, hidden in the acid forest. It's been collecting data on our physiology, our neural patterns, our stress responses, everything." Lore examined the device Kira had brought. Unlike the crude weapons they had discovered earlier, this was sophisticated, a testament to human ingenuity focused on understanding rather than destroying. "They're studying us," he said, the realization dawning with chilling clarity. "Not our weapons or our technology. Us. Our biology. Our psychology." "But why?" Kira asked. "What advantage could such knowledge provide against our military superiority?" The answer came the next day, when Captain Serax himself led a reconnaissance mission to locate the source of the engineered fog. Despite Lore's objections, the captain insisted on commanding the operation personally, a matter of pride, of refusing to be cowed by an enemy he couldn't see. They lost contact with Serax's team 4 hours into the mission. The tracking signals showed them approaching the densest part of the acid forest before abruptly going offline, one by one, until only the captains remained. That signal began moving erratically, as if Serax were running, pursued by something back toward the base. Lore organized a rescue party immediately, but by the time they reached the coordinates of Serax's last known position, they found only his communication device, deliberately placed on a rock formation like an offering. Of the captain himself, there was no sign. Then, at the edge of their sensor range, a figure appeared briefly, a bipedal form, moving with fluid grace through the toxic underbrush. Human in proportion, but somehow wrong. Its outline blurred by what appeared to be adaptive camouflage, a skin that mimicked the colors and textures of its surroundings. "There!" Lore shouted, raising his weapon, but the figure was already gone, vanishing into the fog like a phantom. They searched for hours, finding nothing but more carefully arranged Krivari bodies, the remains of Serax's team, positioned in a circle around a small human device that emitted a constant, barely audible tone. Lore recognized it immediately as the same frequency he had isolated from the recording. As they prepared to retrieve the bodies, a sound burst through their communication systems, the rhythmic beating of a heart, the steady flow of blood through vessels, the controlled intake and release of breath. but amplified now, synchronized across multiple channels, impossible to silence. The effect on the rescue team was immediate and devastating. Two soldiers collapsed, their neural systems overloaded by signals that matched the Kravari fight or flight response too perfectly to be coincidence. Others began firing wildly into the fog, their disciplined training forgotten in the face of a threat they couldn't comprehend. Lore felt it too, an overwhelming urge to flee, to abandon his comrades, to seek safety at any cost. It took every ounce of his training to resist, to force logical thought through the wave of primal fear. "Back to base," he ordered, gathering the survivors. "Controlled retreat, now!" They made it back, but the damage was done. The Light Battalion, pride of the Kravari militia, had been reduced to less than 40 effective soldiers. Those who remained huddled in the command center, their confidence shattered, their belief in technological superiority exposed as the fatal flaw it had always been. The whispers came again that night. But this time, they weren't mimicking Seracs. They were using the voices of the dead, comrades calling out for help, describing horrors that existed only in the darkest corners of the Kravari imagination. The psychological warfare was relentless, precisely calibrated to exploit vulnerabilities that only an intimate knowledge of Kravari neurology could reveal. In desperation, soldiers began breaking protocol, separating from their assigned units, believing they might survive alone where groups had failed. Some attempted to barricade themselves in secure areas, only to find critical systems failing, life support irregularities, power fluctuations, security doors that wouldn't close fully. Food and medical supplies began to disappear. Not all at once, but in carefully measured amounts that created an artificial scarcity. The remaining soldiers found themselves competing for resources that should have been abundant, their social cohesion eroding under the pressure of orchestrated deprivation. Through it all, Lure continued his analysis, driven by the conviction that understanding the enemy's methods was their only hope for survival. He had gathered all the human devices they had found, the weapons, the recording mechanism, the biological analyzer, the tone emitter, and laid them out in the laboratory like pieces of a puzzle. The pattern that emerged was both elegant and terrifying. The humans weren't using advanced technology to defeat the Kravari. They were using the Kravari themselves. Every aspect of their strategy was designed to turn the aliens' own biology, psychology, and social structure against them. The weapons were decoys, meant to reinforce the Kravari belief in their technological superiority, while the real attack targeted systems far more vulnerable than any computer network, the minds of the soldiers themselves. On the seventh day, with the base reduced to a shadow of its former strength, Lure made his decision. He would go out alone, not to fight, but to observe, to gather the final pieces of information they needed. If the humans wanted to study the Kravari, then he would study the humans in return. He moved through the acid forest with the caution of a hunter who knows he has become the prey. The fog had thinned somewhat, but visibility remained poor, forcing him to rely more on instinct than technology, a concept that would have been alien to him just days ago. 3 hours into his self-assigned mission, Lure found what he was looking for, a human observation post, cleverly concealed within the twisted vegetation. It was empty of personnel, but full of equipment, sensors, recording devices, and most importantly, a data storage unit containing detailed analyses of Kravari physiological responses to various stimuli. The information was comprehensive and horrifying. The humans had cataloged every weakness, every vulnerability, every instinctive response that could be exploited. They had created a perfect psychological warfare strategy, tailored specifically to the Kravari nervous system. As Lure absorbed this knowledge, he became aware of a presence behind him, silent, patient, watching. He turned slowly, weapon raised, to face a human figure standing just at the edge of visibility. The adaptive camouflage skin made it difficult to discern details, but the bipedal form was unmistakable. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the human raised a hand, a gesture that Lore recognized from his cultural studies as non-threatening. Not surrender, but not aggression either. Acknowledgement. The human spoke, its voice modulated to a frequency that wouldn't trigger the Kravari stress response. Another indication of how thoroughly they understood their enemy. "You are the first to seek understanding rather than victory," the human said in flawless Kravari language. "That is why you will be the one who returns." "Returns?" Lore questioned, his weapon still raised. "To tell the others why they lost, why they will always lose against us. Because of your psychological warfare, your study of our biology." The human's adaptive camouflage shifted, revealing more of its features. A face that Lore found simultaneously familiar and alien, with eyes that reflected a depth of experience at odds with the species' relatively short lifespan. "No," the human replied, "because we have been fighting ourselves for thousands of years. Every weapon you develop, every tactic you employ, every advantage you think you have, we have already used them against our own kind. We have spent our entire history learning how to kill each other in every conceivable way." The human gestured toward the acid forest, the fog, the silent battlefield that had claimed so many Kravari lives. This is restraint. We could have used biological weapons tailored to your specific genetic code. We could have introduced nanites programmed to dismantle your neural pathways. We could have bombarded this moon with radiation calibrated to affect only Kravari tissue. "Then why didn't you?" Lore demanded, struggling to reconcile this information with everything he had been taught about human inferiority. "Because we don't need to," the human said simply. "Your greatest weakness isn't biological or technological. It's conceptual. You think of warfare as an extension of technology, a contest of weapons and shields. We think of it as a state of being. Every human is born into a world shaped by conflict, raised in a society that has evolved through countless wars. We don't have to learn how to fight. We have to learn how not to." The human took a step back, its form beginning to blend once more with the surrounding forest. "Return to your people, Sergeant Lore. Tell them what you've learned here. Tell them why humans are the deadliest warriors in the universe. Not because of what we do to our enemies, but because of what we've done to ourselves." And then the human was gone, leaving Lore alone with a truth more devastating than any weapon could ever be. The journey back to the base was a blur of revelation and despair. Lore moved mechanically, his mind overwhelmed by the paradigm shift he had experienced. Everything he had believed about warfare, about the superiority of Kravari military doctrine, had been upended by a single conversation. He found the base in chaos. In his absence, the remaining soldiers had fragmented completely, abandoning their posts, turning on each other in some cases. The command center was deserted, its sophisticated systems dark and silent. Lieutenant Kira had established a makeshift operations room in the medical bay, where she was attempting to maintain some semblance of order among the 15 soldiers who still responded to the chain of command. "Sergeant!" she exclaimed as he entered. "We thought you were dead. Captain Sarax returned an hour ago, but he's changed. He's ordered an immediate evacuation, but there are no transport ships responding to our signals." "Where is he now?" Lore asked, noticing how the soldiers flinched at every sound, their neural indicators flashing with stress patterns that approached systemic failure. "In his quarters, preparing the final report for High Command." Kira's voice dropped to a near whisper. "He's recommending that Artemis 9 be abandoned, that the entire sector be declared off-limits to Kravari forces." Lore nodded, not surprised. "He's right, we can't win here." "But we're the Light Battalion," one of the younger soldiers protested. "We've never retreated from any enemy." "We've never faced an enemy like this," Lore replied. "An enemy that doesn't try to defeat our weapons, but instead turns us against ourselves." He made his way to Sarax's quarters, finding the door unsealed. Inside, the captain sat at his communication terminal, his once proud posture now bent with the weight of defeat. He looked up as Lure entered, his eyes reflecting not recognition, but a dull resignation. "They let me go," Sarax said without preamble. "They showed me everything, their plans, their analyses, their understanding of our every weakness. Then they let me walk back here, knowing I would order a retreat, knowing I would tell High Command that this moon cannot be held." "They did the same with me," Lure admitted. "But they told me why." He shared what he had learned, the human perspective on warfare, the concept of conflict as a fundamental aspect of their existence, rather than a technological exercise. As he spoke, he saw understanding dawn in Sarax's eyes, followed by a profound sadness. "Then we were doomed from the moment we landed," the captain concluded. "Not because our technology failed, but because we didn't understand what we were fighting against." "Not what, Captain? Who?" "We didn't understand who we were fighting against." In the days that followed, as they waited for the evacuation ships that might never come, Lure compiled his own report, not for High Command, but for anyone who might survive to read it, a detailed analysis of human warfare methodology based on everything he had observed and learned. He wrote of how the humans had used minimal technology to maximum effect, turning the environment itself into a weapon. How they had studied Krivari biology, not to heal, but to harm, identifying pressure points in both physiology and psychology. How they had employed sound, light, and environmental manipulation to create conditions that specifically targeted Krivari vulnerabilities. But most importantly, he wrote of the fundamental difference in perspective that had doomed the Krivari from the start. The humans didn't view warfare as a separate domain, requiring specialized knowledge and technology. For them, it was an extension of their daily existence, a refinement of the survival instincts and competitive drives that had shaped their evolution. When the evacuation finally came, only Lure and 7 others remained alive to board the transport. Captain Sarax had disappeared 3 days earlier, leaving behind his insignia and a single message: "They are not fighting us. We are fighting ourselves." As the transport lifted off from the surface of Artemis 9, Lure looked down at the acid forest, the abandoned base, the desolate landscape that had become a graveyard for the Light Battalion. Somewhere down there, invisible among the toxic vegetation, the humans were watching, studying, learning, not how to defeat the next enemy, but how to understand them. Because that, Lure now realized, was the terrifying reason humans were the deadliest warriors in the universe. They didn't need to develop new weapons or tactics for each opponent. They simply needed to know their enemy well enough to let that enemy defeat itself. The true horror wasn't that humans were stronger or more technologically advanced. It was that they understood the concept of warfare on a level that made technology almost irrelevant. They had spent millennia perfecting the art of turning an enemy's strengths into weaknesses, of using a society's own structure and beliefs against it. And as the transport disappeared into the upper atmosphere, carrying the last survivors of what had once been the pride of the Krivari military, Lure finally understood the humans' parting words. The deadliest warriors in the universe weren't those with the most advanced weapons or the strongest armor. They were those who had learned, through countless generations of fighting their own kind, that the most effective way to defeat an enemy was to make that enemy defeat itself. That was the terrifying reason humans were the deadliest warriors in the universe. Not because of what they did to their enemies, but because of what they had done to themselves. 50 cycles later, as the Krivari Alliance signed the final surrender documents, ending the brief but devastating war that had followed the Artemis 9 incident, Lure, now High Commander of what remained of the Krivari military, stood face to face with the human diplomatic delegation. He recognized one of them immediately, the same individual he had encountered in the acid forest, seemingly unchanged despite the passage of time. "You knew this would happen," Lure said quietly, as the formal proceedings continued around them. "You knew that once I returned with my report, our leadership would refuse to believe it, that they would launch a full-scale offensive to prove their superiority." The human nodded. That same patient expression, visible now, without the camouflage skin. "Your society is built on technological achievement. The idea that a lesser species could defeat you through understanding, rather than superior weaponry, was too threatening to your cultural identity. You had to attack, to prove us wrong. And in doing so, we proved you right," Lure concluded bitterly. "This isn't victory for us," the human said, surprising Lure with the genuine regret in its voice. "It's tragedy. We hoped your people would understand the message of Artemis 9, would recognize that continuing down the path of technological warfare against us could only end one way. Because you've been fighting yourselves for thousands of years," Lure quoted from memory. "Yes, every weapon you developed, we had already used against our own kind. Every tactic you employed, we had already countered in our own conflicts. You were fighting an enemy who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to survive against themselves, the most dangerous predator their world had ever known." The signing ceremony concluded, the formal transfer of territories and technologies proceeding according to terms that were generous by any standard of interstellar diplomacy. The humans weren't interested in conquest or subjugation. They wanted only understanding and, where possible, peaceful coexistence. As the delegations prepared to depart, the human approached Lure one final time. "There's one thing you should know," it said. "The reason we let you live, let you return from Artemis 9, wasn't just to deliver a message. It was because you showed something rare among your people, the willingness to understand, rather than simply overcome. That capacity for empathy, for seeing beyond your own perspective, is the one thing that might someday make your people as dangerous as mine." "Dangerous?" Lure questioned. "Or effective?" The human smiled, a gesture that Lure had learned to read as genuine, rather than threatening. "In warfare, they are the same thing. But there's a third option, the path we hope your people will choose, now that this conflict is over." "Which is?" "To recognize that the deadliest warriors aren't necessarily the best survivors. We've nearly destroyed ourselves countless times because of our capacity for violence. Our greatest struggle has always been against our own nature." The human extended its hand, another gesture Lure had studied and now understood as an offer of equality and respect. "Perhaps your people can learn from our mistakes," the human said. "Perhaps you can find a way to channel your technological brilliance toward creation rather than destruction. If so, then the losses at Artemis 9 and in the war that followed will have served a greater purpose than either of us could have imagined." Lure hesitated, then extended his own hand, completing the human ritual of connection. In that moment, he glimpsed a possible future, one where the Kravari and humans moved beyond the paradigm of conflict that had defined their first contact. "We will try," he promised. "So will we," the human replied. "It's what we've always done, after all. Try to be better than what we are, better than what we've been." As the human delegation departed, Lure reflected on the long journey that had brought him from that acid forest on Artemis 9 to this moment of tenuous peace. The terrifying reason humans were the deadliest warriors in the universe was the same reason they might, someday, become its greatest peacekeepers. Their unique capacity to understand, to adapt, and to overcome not just external enemies, but their own destructive impulses. It was a lesson written in the blood of the Light Battalion, in the ashes of the Kravari war fleet, in the ruins of 1,000 worlds that had underestimated the species that had perfected warfare by practicing it first and most brutally on themselves. And as he watched the human ships depart, Lure found himself hoping that it was a lesson neither species would need to learn again.